Chapter 620. Elvis also slowly stood up from Gumengmeng's side. He took 2 steps forward and stood half a step behind Leah. He staggered his upper body and completely blocked, Jean, from Gumengmeng's line of sight. Ian flew out of nowhere and circled twice in the air. Then, he spread his wings and flew in midair like a half-orc, looking down at Jean from above. It was not an exaggeration to say that Jean felt that there was an impassable iron wall in front of him. It was a high wall that gave off a strong sense of oppression and made it difficult for one to breathe. Walk over? Huh, stop joking. He had no doubt that when he walked past these people and reached Gumengmeng, not even his bones would be left. Every cell in his body was afraid. Jean could not help but take a step back and said, I'll go. I'll go, all right? Oakley stood behind Jean, leading a group of tribesmen as the acting witch doctor. Among them, there was also the snow fox elder who was at odds with him previously. They lined up in a row and behind them was a majestic group of beasts. In the dark night, pairs of bloodthirsty and dangerous eyes reflected sparks of fire, giving off an intimidating aura. Oakley laughed softly and asked, "Where do you think this is? That you can come and go as you please?" The snow fox elder had an unfriendly expression and a pair of wise eyes shone with coldness. He looked at Jean and said, "You have already offended the mighty beast deity by pretending to be the messenger and disrupting the celebration party of the messenger and the 9th highness of the snow fox tribe. As the elders of the messenger tribe, we cannot let you leave so easily." Jean was really panicking. He originally thought that his looks matched Gumengmeng's description of Jean, so he came with the mentality of giving it a try. He thought that since he matched Gumengmeng's description in every aspect, maybe she would like him when she sees him. Males, as long as they were pleasing to the eye, they could just accept them. As for whether he was the real Jean, who would care? He did not want to make things so big. Jean was extremely flustered. There was a wall in front, a pack of wolves behind and a huge bird flying above his head. There's no escape. What followed was a live broadcast of a group fight. Yes, a group fight. A group of people, beating up Jean. Elvis and the rest did not have a chance to attack as Oriton and Barit returned to Gumengmeng's side. Elvis hugged Gumengmeng back into his arms while Leah laid on Gumengmeng's knees, wagging his tail in boredom. Ian circled around twice before disappearing into the darkness again. A group of people around the bonfire were violently kicking Jean. "All right." After a long while, Gumengmeng said softly, saving Jean's life. Leah looked up with a puzzled expression. With a slightly sour tone, he asked, "Your heart aches?" Gumengmeng did not answer Lee's question. She just sat at her original spot and looked disdainfully at Jean, who was beaten to the point that he was on his last breath. She asked, "Tell me, who sent you here?" Jean was twitching as he laid on the ground. When he came, he got a body full of injuries in order to portray his character. This time, he did not need to portray his injuries anymore as they were more realistic than before. Hearing Gumengmeng's question, he shook his head blankly and said, No one sent me." Chapter 621. Jean was stunned, shook his head, and said, No, it was a crippled beast who taught me." Crippled beast. Cole. The smile on Gumengmeng's face turned colder and her gaze was filled with venom. Her voice was calm and cold and it was hard to tell if she was happy or angry. She just asked, "Where is he?" Jean was stunned, then he shook his head and said, "I don't know. He just happened to pass by our tribe and met me. Then he told me that I looked especially like an old lover of the great messenger. Then he told me that if I used the name Jean to see you, you would definitely like me. That way, I could become the male of the great messenger. Even if you don't like me, you'll still let me stay in the messenger's tribe on account of my resemblance to that person. Our tribe was too weak in the past, and all the capable males had gone to better tribes to develop, leaving behind only the old and weak. Every year, when winter comes, there would be waves and waves of stray beasts coming to snatch our food. If we don't leave now, we will all be forced to death. Gu Mengmeng quietly looked at the male who was beaten until his face was swollen and could not even stand up. She slowly spoke for him, so you escaped and want to seek refuge with me? Yu Sijin firmly nodded his head and replied, yes. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and asked him back, why do you think I will accept a deserter who abandoned his tribe? Yu Sijin was startled for a moment, then shook his head and said, I am not a deserter. Gu Mengmeng leaned back, her two thick tails pressing against her waist like a luxurious sofa backrest, allowing her to borrow strength to sit more comfortably. Gu Mengmeng looked at Yu Sijin nonchalantly, oh? He coughed. Yu Sijin was a little emotional as he said, I came to seek refuge with the great messenger so that Saint Nazir can accept my people. Gu Mengmeng gave a teasing smile and said, honey trap. Yu Sijin stood rooted to the ground, not knowing how to respond. What honey trap, he did not understand at all. Gu Mengmeng leaned forward with her elbows on her knees and the back of her hand supporting her chin. She sized up Yu Sijin, who did not have an inch of good flesh on his body, and asked with a smile, as long as I am willing to accept your people into Saint Nazir and become my beast pet, are you willing to? The male nodded without hesitation and said, beast pet, guardian beast, or even food, I am willing. But Leah burst out laughing. He glanced sideways at Yu Sijin and said, even if you are willing, you have to see if our Mengmeng is willing. You have to be at least as good as me to be a beast pet. Look at your battered appearance. Who would like it? Gu Mengmeng sat at the same spot and did not comment on Li's words. She just said, you said it yourself, the tribe is only left with the old, weak and sick. They will only be a burden if they join Saint Nazir. Why should I find trouble for my own tribe? You and I, said, Eugene, if not everyone, please, Eugene, although they are only half-orcs, but... Gu Mengmeng stood up and made a gesture. The 16 valued females from the previous beauty pageant, as well as Sauter's original female snow foxes, all walked in front of Gu Mengmeng in unison. It was really a riot of colors. The most important thing was, they were all perfect females. Gu Mengmeng stood in the middle of a large group of females. Even though they were of the same gender, it gave people the illusion that Gu Mengmeng was overbearing and aggressive, lying in the midst of flowers. Using 4 words to sum it up perfectly, invincible east? Aside, Chapter 622. The light in Yu Sijin's eyes completely dimmed. The most ideal situation would be for him to become Gu Mengmeng's male and receive her love, so that he could take care of his tribesmen. The next best thing would be for Gu Mengmeng to keep 2 half-orc females, so that even if the males could not survive the winter, they could die with no regrets. But now, his face was swollen and bruised, and looking at the males standing beside the messenger, was this how it felt to feel inferior? As for females, if it was any other tribe, even a half-orc female would definitely be accepted, but the messenger's tribe did not seem to lack females at all. Gu Mengmeng passed through the crowd and walked step by step to Yu Sijin. She squatted down and said in a calm voice, without any emotions, your bargaining chip is not worth mentioning in my eyes. If you want to discuss terms with me, at least show some sincerity. Yu Sijin did not understand and just stared blankly at Gu Mengmeng. He did not know why, but he just felt that Gu Mengmeng was giving him a chance. After thinking for a while, he said, as long as the mighty messenger is willing to accept my tribesmen, I can do anything you want me to. Anything. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and said, tell me the situation you saw that person from start to end, don't leave out a single word. Yu Sijin frowned and thought carefully, before starting to narrate. More than 10 days ago, there were stray beasts attacking our tribe. It was him who suddenly appeared and helped us defeat the stray beasts. We begged him to stay in our tribe. Although he was a crippled beast, he was still a 5th-level orc. With him, we would not have to be afraid of stray beasts attacking our tribe again. But he looked very sad and just looked into the distance, saying calmly, if I stay, it will be the real danger. Then, he suddenly looked at me and did not speak. After staring for a long time until I got goosebumps, he then opened his mouth and said that I looked like the messenger's old love. If I wanted to save the tribe, I could only rely on Saint Nazir. Then, I came. Thinking about it, he was really rash. With just a few words from a person whose name he didn't even know, he actually brought his clansmen to this place after a long journey. Gu Mengmeng laughed coldly. Stray beasts attacked the tribe and he just so happened to appear and save the tribe? Cole did not look like a fox with a Lei Feng personality. Moreover, his mating mark had already been washed away by Gu Mengmeng. He was a stray beast himself. Why would he help the tribe fight against the stray beasts? Could it be that he had directed and acted on his own from start to finish? Gu Mengmeng smiled sinisterly, but she did not tell Yu Sijin her inner thoughts. She just said coldly, "Didn't he say anything else?" Yu Sijin frowned, thought carefully for a long time, and said, "Oh, there is." He had even said something very strange, such as, "If a counterfeit that is closer to the original appears, how long will you be favored?" That was the case. I didn't know what he was talking about. When I asked him again, he just smiled and said, "I'm just talking to myself." So I didn't take it to heart. Counterfeit? Gu Mengmeng turned back and saw that Leah was indeed unable to hold back his smile. He even knew about Li's habit of imitating Yu Sijin to please him, and he even spent so much effort to find an imitation that looked more like Yu Sijin, just to suppress Leah. Chapter 623. Yu Sijin could not keep up with Gu Mengmeng's pace and just laid on the ground, looking up at Gu Mengmeng as she walked back to Elvis and Li's side step by step. She sat down and returned to her original embrace, one black and one white tail swaying lightly on her left and right. The snow fox laid on her knees, looking enchanting and affectionate. The group of females laughed and laughed as they dispersed. The people behind them who were originally aggressive also retracted their murderous aura and scattered in all directions. It was as if the tension from before had never happened. After being stunned for a long time, he finally regained his senses. He and his clansmen could really stay in Saint Nazir. He could really become a member of the messenger's tribe. Struggling to stand up, Yu Sijin took a step forward and was stopped by Oriton. He did not say anything and only looked at Yu Sijin expressionlessly. They were both level 3 orcs, but Yu Sijin knew very well that he was no match for Oriton. Moreover, he had no intention of causing trouble, he only wanted to express his gratitude. So he shouted at Gu Mengmeng, "Burke." Gu Mengmeng looked at him from the corner of her eyes, not saying a word. Yu Sijin shouted again, "My name is Berg. From today onwards, my life belongs to Lord Emissary, and I'm at your disposal." Gu Mengmeng looked away and ignored him. She didn't need anyone else to put their lives in her hands. She no longer had the strength to bear another millennium. As she retracted her gaze, she saw Oriton handing Burke over to one of the elders and officially conveyed Gu Mengmeng's orders as the guardian of the messengers to temporarily settle the Burke tribesmen in Sauter and bring them along when Gu Mengmeng returned to Saint Nazir. Leah slowly straightened his body and wiped away the playful expression on his face. He looked at Gu Mengmeng and asked, "You clearly know who instigated him to come and you still accepted him?" Gu Mengmeng chuckled. "The beast deity told me to maintain a kind heart. He said that this is the only way for me to find a way to save Hada." Leah remained silent. Hada's matter was a thorn in Gu Mengmeng's heart. As long as that little wolf cub did not wake up, Gu Mengmeng would be forced to take on all of Cole's tricks. He sighed and said, "I'll send someone to keep an eye on him." Gu Mengmeng chuckled. "Afraid that he will be another Ellie?" Leah nodded in acknowledgement. But Gu Mengmeng shook her head and said, "There's no need. A person who is willing to sacrifice himself for the tribe will not place his own tribe in a dangerous situation just for Cole's goal." Elvis's voice was slightly cold. "You believe him?" Gu Mengmeng nodded. She did not know if it was because of Snake, but she could now easily discern the subtle emotions of others, especially lies and fear. Elvis sighed and said, "Because he really looks like Yu Sijin, isn't that right?" Gu Mengmeng chuckled. She glanced sideways at Elvis and then at Leah. Do the two of you still think that Eugene really exists? Elvis remained silent and Leah nodded. Gu Mengmeng was helpless, but she could not be bothered to explain further. She just said, pass down the order. In the future, if anyone claims to be Eugene, there's no need to ask for permission. Just beat him away. Elvis frowned and his gaze darkened. I actually hope that he really finds his way here. I will fulfill my promise and stay by your side. Gu Mengmeng was a little surprised and looked at Elvis in confusion. Chapter 624. Gu Mengmeng's heart clenched. Had her emotions reached such a stage that Elvis and Leah could not do anything about it? Actually, it was really nothing much. She just did not have much interest in anything and was not too upset even if she could not be happy. Snake's matter, she had already gotten over it, or perhaps it was the feeling Snake had felt when he saved her that combined with her guilt. With the beast deities and Wabiai's guidance and reminders, she was no longer that upset. She was just not happy or angry, but it seemed to have made those two fellows very worried. The corners of Gu Mengmeng's mouth twitched as she forced a smile. She looked at Elvis and said, I am really fine. I will slowly get better after a few days of getting used to this 1,000-year soul. Don't worry, all right? Elvis sighed softly, then hugged Gu Mengmeng even tighter. His faint and hoarse voice rang above Gu Mengmeng's head. I'm afraid the only thing I can't learn in this lifetime is not to worry about you. Gu Mengmeng did not say anything else and just quietly allowed Elvis to hug her. The three little ones were drenched in sweat from running and suddenly pounced into Gu Mengmeng's arms. Although Gu Mengmeng would not be pushed down by them now, Leah and Elvis still instinctively tried to stop them. But these three little ones were too agile. They made use of their bodies to make use of the time difference and directly bypassed Elvis and Leah from 3 different angles. They ran to Gu Mengmeng's side with their buttocks wobbling. Mummy, when are you going to sing? Jiaoyu carried Qi Xian in his arms as he looked up at Gu Mengmeng and asked. Heda lay at Gu Mengmeng's feet, his big bright eyes filled with anticipation. But he pursed his lips and did not say anything. Kanwo occupied the most advantageous position and hung his whole body in Gu Mengmeng's arms. He looked up at Gu Mengmeng and followed Jiaoyu's words. Yes, Mummy, when are you going to sing? Gu Mengmeng rubbed Kanwo's little head and kissed Heda and Jiaoyu. Finally, she carried Qi Xian in her arms and said, let's go and sing now. The 3 children's eyes lit up. Kanwo gave Gu Mengmeng's embrace to Qi Xian and followed closely behind her. He asked, Mummy, can we follow you? Gu Mengmeng smiled and nodded. Of course, I'll give you VIP seats. Jiaoyu, what is a VIP seat? Gu Mengmeng brought the 4 children and walked towards the bonfire, saying, very important people. It means a very important person. Kanwo sniggered and turned back to glance at Elvis, clearly provoking him. He went forward and hugged Gu Mengmeng's shoulders. At the same time, he accidentally kicked Kanwo to the side. He only looked at Gu Mengmeng's side profile and asked, are Leah and I VIPs too? Gu Mengmeng's face turned red. In the past, Gu Mengmeng could not notice Elvis and Kanwo's little tricks, but now, she could see it very clearly. Chuckling lightly, he said, the VIP seats are limited. If you want to sit, carry Kanwo. The 2 of you can count as 1 seat. Elvis frowned and lowered his head to look at Kanwo. Both father and son had a tacit understanding and spoke at the same time, no. No. Gu Mengmeng chuckled. Oh, you really have telepathy. Chapter 625. Kanwo jumped into Lee's arms and said, I will sit with Daddy Leah. Gu Mengmeng shook her head. Kanwo was clearly the most like Elvis, but Elvis just had the worst relationship with him. Heda pursed his lips. He also wanted someone to carry him, but why was there no place for him? Gu Mengmeng lowered her head and hugged Qi Xian with one arm. She opened her other arm and looked at Heda, saying, Come, let Mummy carry you. Heda looked up and smiled. He shook his head and said, I am the elder brother, I can walk by myself. He was satisfied that he was not neglected. Mummy was already having a hard time, he could not be her burden. Gu Mengmeng rubbed Hedda's little head and bent down to carry him up. She kissed his little face and said, You are the elder brother of the three of them, but also my son. The moment she finished speaking, Gu Mengmeng's arms felt lighter. Elvis took over Hedda and Qi Xian was carried by Leah. Leah had always been on good terms with the children, so it was not strange that he would carry them. But Elvis, who had never carried anyone other than Jiaoyu, was now willing to carry Hedda in his arms. This made Gu Mengmeng rather surprised. Elvis cleared his throat and said, Your males are still alive, there is no reason for you to suffer. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and said, It's just carrying two sons, they are not that heavy. Elvis stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Gu Mengmeng. His blue eyes were filled with seriousness as he said word by word, No matter how heavy it is, I should be the one to carry it. Gu Mengmeng did not argue any further because she knew that Elvis and Leah were already panicking enough. They desperately wanted to do something for her to make her feel better. And all she could do was to cooperate. Nodding, Gu Mengmeng had already walked to the side of the bonfire. The drum used for Colin's proposal was left in Saint Nazaire, but Leah rushed to make a new one after knowing that Gu Mengmeng was going to hold a bonfire party and had promised the children to sing. It was basically the same as the first version, but there were some improvements on the details, making it look much more exquisite than the one in Saint Nazaire. Gu Mengmeng held the drum stick and hammered on the drum, producing a deep and resonant sound. With that hammering, only the crackling sound of the burning wood could be heard in the entire square. Everyone looked at Gu Mengmeng in unison. Gu Mengmeng took a deep breath and flipped onto the drum. She sat sideways lazily with one foot on the edge of the drum and the other hanging down casually. She held the drum stick in her hands and hit the drum rhythmically, each beat more concentrated than the one before. After the last beat, Gu Mengmeng slowly opened her mouth to sing Aliens. As only a few races in the beast world knew how to sing, this song, Alien, had become Gu Mengmeng's masterpiece. Every time the tribesmen heard it, their blood would boil. Following Colin's roar, the scene was so heated that it almost went out of control. Gu Mengmeng instinctively turned to look at Qi Xian. He was still sleeping quietly. Smiling bitterly, Gu Mengmeng looked down in disappointment. She also knew that Qi Xian was poisoned by coal. How could one song wake him up? She had only agreed to Hedda's request because she could tell that the children were thinking of ways to make her happy. She could not bear to reject the children's kind intentions, but in the end, she was still delusional. What if Qi Xian could really wake up from a song? That would be the greatest mercy from the heavens. Chapter 626. The night campfire party lasted for a long time. To be precise, it was a night of revelry for the Snow Fox tribe. After 1,000 years, the Snow Fox tribe finally became the closest tribe to the messenger of the beast deity. The worries that had been in turmoil for 1,000 years gradually disappeared along with the mark on Gu Mengmeng's left ear. In the following days, Leah became very busy. Gu Mengmeng intentionally handed solder over to Oakley to manage. After all, in the 1 month that Gu Mengmeng was in the Snake King Valley, Oakley managed the tribe well despite the estrangement between the two tribes. So Lee's main task for this period was to bring Oakley along to handle some tribe matters and teach him how to balance the relationship between power and benefits. After Leah and Gu Mengmeng became partners, the Snow Fox tribe became more peaceful. In Lee's words, they made a ruckus previously because they were too uneasy and afraid that Gu Mengmeng would abandon them. So they desperately wanted to prove that they were stronger than the people of Saint Nazaire. This kind of situation was very common. It was the legendary saying that the more lacking something, the more they would flaunt it. But now that Leah and Gu Mengmeng's relationship had been confirmed, and Gu Mengmeng had told the elders that they were a family, the pride and nobility that had been ingrained into the Snow Fox tribe's bones for 1,000 years had gradually awakened, becoming the best framework to restrain them. There was no need to worry too much about restraining them, just a light sentence, "Don't forget you are from the Snow Fox tribe." It was easy for the elder and those troublesome females to settle down. The rain came suddenly. Gu Mengmeng had never seen such a majestic aura that could destroy everything in the modern world. Sitting at the entrance of the stone house, Gu Mengmeng reached out one hand to catch the rainwater falling from the sky. Gu Mengmeng frowned slightly as she watched the bean-sized raindrops land on her hand. It actually hurt a little from being smashed. If it was him, perhaps he would be happy. After all, he loved rainy days the most. A piece of beast skin was draped over her. Gu Mengmeng didn't turn back and just leaned into the familiar embrace. This rain will last for at least 10 days. The food reserves at home might not be enough, so I need to go out for a while. Elvis's gentle voice rang from above her head. There were quite a lot of people in this house now. Elvis and Lee's appetites had always been huge, and they would usually come back after eating their fill while hunting. Accompanying Gu Mengmeng to eat was just to enjoy the feeling of eating with her. After Huda and his brothers evolved, their appetites had obviously increased. The three of them could eat almost an entire wild beast in one meal. After inheriting Snake's powers, Gu Mengmeng's appetite had obviously increased. A family would need about 5 wild beasts a day. The food reserves at home were indeed not enough. Gu Mengmeng stood up slowly and stuffed the beast skin back into Elvis's arms. Then, she looked at the rain and said, "I'll go, this kind of weather is more suitable for me than anyone else." Gu Mengmeng had just taken her first step, and before her heel could even touch the ground, the back of her hand was pulled back by someone and she fell back into Elvis's chest. Hug. Elvis draped the beast skin hood over Gu Mengmeng's body, then hugged her whole body in his arms. After staying silent for a while, he said, "My female should be pampered. As long as I'm alive, there won't be any weather suitable for you to travel around. Understand?" Chapter 627. Elvis frowned and said, "You can't get drenched in the rain, water will enter your brain." Gu Mengmeng was taken aback for a moment before she burst out laughing. She remembered that this was what she used to tease Elvis and Leah. That time when they were digging bamboo shoots in the bamboo forest, Ian was also present, and the 3 males even shook their heads with a straight face, saying things like, "I won't die anyway, it shouldn't be serious." He actually took it seriously and even remembered it till now. Elvis did not know what was so funny about this sentence, but it was the biggest smile Gu Mengmeng had seen ever since she returned from the Snake King Valley. It was rare to see her face so radiant, and Elvis felt as if spring had bloomed in his heart and the sun was shining brightly in her smile. Elvis's large hand cupped Gu Mengmeng's little face, and through the gaps between his fingers, her gaze was clear and calm. A faint smile was already extremely precious to Elvis, and he was suddenly so afraid of losing this smile. He even thought, so what if he got drenched in the rain, as long as she was happy? Even if he had to drown in the rain with her, he was willing. For some strange reason, Elvis actually nodded and said, "Don't run around, you must always stay within my sight." Gu Mengmeng knew that Elvis had agreed. In the past, she would always act cute and throw a tantrum whenever she asked him to do something, but as long as it was something bad for her body, he would never back down. But now, just a smile was enough to make him compromise. She must have done something wrong in the end, otherwise why would he become more and more humble after mating for more than half a year and having 4 children? Gu Mengmeng wrapped her arms around Elvis's arm and leaned against his shoulder. She nodded and said, "All right, I will stick to you like this." Her heart felt as if it was being ruthlessly tugged at by something. Elvis lowered his head and kissed Gu Mengmeng's hair. He smiled and did not say a word, only using the beast skin to wrap her up more tightly. Then, he carried her up and strode into the rain. The raindrops landed on the beast skin, giving off a concentrated thud sound. The beast skin had a certain waterproof function, and the raindrops slid down the fur on the beast skin, not drenching Gu Mengmeng at all. Gu Mengmeng wrapped her little arms around Elvis's neck and stretched out an arm behind him to catch the raindrops falling from the sky. It still hurts as much as before, but this feeling doesn't seem too bad." Elvis quickly brought Gu Mengmeng into the heart of the forest. With a few leaps, he placed Gu Mengmeng in a relatively open area. He tidied up the beast's skin and reminded her, "Don't run around, understand?" Gu Meng Meng nodded and gave Elvis a reassuring smile. Elvis transformed into a wolf and charged into the depths of the misty rain. He wanted to end the battle quickly and not let Gu Meng Meng wait for too long. Gu Meng Meng sat in the rain, hugging her knees. She lifted her face slightly and squinted her eyes, allowing the rain to hit her face. Why do snakes like rainy days? The rain was clearly very painful when it hit the body. A person slowly approached Gu Meng Meng. The rain fell to the ground and rose up again. Mist filled the air, and even with Gu Meng Meng's eyesight, she could not see that person's face clearly. The smell was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't remember whose smell it was. Step by step, when Gu Meng Meng saw clearly the person carrying the prey, the emotions on her face had completely disappeared. "It's you?" Gu Meng Meng asked gently. Chapter 628. Gu Meng Meng sized up Burke, who was standing beside her and using his prey to shield her from the rain. "What are you doing?" Burke carried his prey on his shoulders. In order to shield Gu Meng Meng from the rain as much as possible, he stood against the wind. The rain hit him from behind, but he stood there resolutely without moving an inch. He replied, "I met Elvis on my way back. Are you waiting for him?" Gu Meng Meng looked at Burke. Gu Meng Meng did not reply. She just quietly lowered her head to look at the raindrops falling into the puddle beside her feet. Drop by drop, ripples spread out in circles, but it did not form a circle before it was smashed by another drop of rain. Burke didn't mind and continued. "I came out to hunt for the elders in the tribe. You said before, if we stay, we must be self-sufficient and not be a burden to the tribe." Gu Meng Meng still didn't reply. After the incident with Snake, Gu Meng Meng clearly knew that if you don't want to give others a chance right from the start, then keep your kindness and easygoing. Don't give others hope and let them misunderstand. Burke acted as if he couldn't see Gu Meng Meng's rejection. "I, Burke, am a man of my words. You protected our entire tribe. My life is yours." Gu Meng Meng saw that Burke had no intention of stopping. She glanced at him and said coldly, "Your life has no value to me. So you can keep it for yourself. I don't want it. Also, you are disturbing me from watching the rain. So please leave and stop bothering me." Burke was stunned for 2 seconds. His expression froze. He then lowered his head and said, "I will accompany you until Elvis returns. After all, this is the wilderness. It's not safe for you to be alone." The rain was still pouring. The surroundings were misty and cold. But it made Gu Meng Meng feel very comfortable. Gu Meng Meng laughed softly. "Do you think, in the entire beast world, anyone can hurt me?" The beast pressure slowly seeping out made Burke's legs wobble. He frowned and clenched his teeth, unwilling to leave. Gu Meng Meng retracted her beast pressure and looked at him calmly. "I won't accept you. So don't bother trying to please me. There are many females in the tribe. Your chances of success will be higher if you change your target." Even though it was raining cats and dogs, Borg could clearly feel a layer of cold sweat forming on his body. The coldness in his bones was even colder than the rain. Gu Meng Meng did have the ability to protect herself, she did not need him. But Burke still shook his head resolutely. "I will stay with Elvis until he returns. Once he returns, I will leave." Gu Meng Meng frowned and said, I don't need your company." Borg stubbornly insisted, "If you don't need company, then don't put on such a lonely expression. It's so heartbreaking." Burke's voice was not loud. If not for Gu Meng Meng's amazing hearing, she might not have heard him through the sound of the rain. After being stunned for a moment, Gu Meng Meng slowly stood up and said, "If you are not leaving, I will." Burke watched as Gu Meng Meng walked into the rain at a steady pace. He was in a daze until she completely disappeared in the rain. He then lowered his head slowly and murmured, "I just want to accompany you." Gu Meng Meng walked into the forest and accurately located Elvis's direction. Chapter 629. Seeing Gu Mengmeng, Elvis was momentarily stunned. Throwing the dead beast aside, he transformed into his human form and walked to Gu Mengmeng. His long black hair stuck to his body and his muscles were defined. The faint smell of blood accentuated his elegance as he stood in the rain, as if he was a mandala flower blooming in hell. "Why are you here?" Elvis furrowed his brows and pulled up the beast's skin to cover her head, preventing the rainwater from entering her eyes. "I saw that you were not back for a long time and got a little anxious, so I came in." Gu Mengmeng looked at the pile of prey behind Elvis and asked, "It's too slow to kill them one by one, why don't you just release your aura and save so much trouble?" Elvis smiled dotingly as he brushed away the raindrops on Gu Mengmeng's face and said, "Releasing your aura will scare the prey out of their guts and the meat will be bitter." "How can we eat it then?" Gu Mengmeng nodded, not really understanding. As a human, Gu Mengmeng did not have any hunting experience. As a snake beast, Snake basically swallowed whatever he wanted to eat and did not need to bring the prey back. Elvis carried all the prey onto his right shoulder and reached out his left arm to carry Gu Mengmeng up, saying, "Let's go back, it's very dangerous in the forest when it's raining. If there's thunder, it'll hurt you easily." Gu Mengmeng smiled and said, "So you left me outside and came in alone?" Elvis nodded and kissed Gu Mengmeng's little face lightly, saying, "Let's go back." Gu Mengmeng did not resist Elvis's kiss and just obediently placed her face on Elvis's chest, saying softly, "Put down the prey." "Huh?" Elvis did not understand but still did as he was told. Gu Mengmeng gave him a look and many little snakes slowly slithered out from behind the trees, then burrowed under the prey and carried them up. Elvis chuckled and said, "That's good too, at least you won't get any blood stains on you." Gu Mengmeng did not say anything and just nodded in Elvis's arms, allowing him to carry her back. When they passed by the place where Gu Mengmeng was sitting, Burke had already left. When she returned to the stone house, Leo was sitting anxiously at the door, looking into the rain. He heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Gu Mengmeng. Without another word, he took Gu Mengmeng from Elvis's arms and walked into the house. He removed her clothes and placed her into the stone bathtub filled with hot water. "Thank you." Gu Mengmeng leaned against the edge of the bathtub, tilting her face as she fiddled with the hot water. Leah squatted outside the bathtub and also leaned against the edge of the bathtub. He looked at Gu Mengmeng face to face and asked, "This rain will last for about 10 days. Are you feeling suffocated at home? How about I bring Sandy over and ask her to keep you company?" Gu Mengmeng shook her head and said, "She always acts like she did something wrong in front of me and is so timid. I think, seeing me, she is also very stressed." "Forget it, I'm fine." Leah held Gu Mengmeng's little hand and said, "How about, I will push all the matters in the tribe to Oakley and focus on staying at home to accompany you, alright?" Gu Mengmeng chuckled and asked, "It's just accompanying Elvis to hunt, why are you so nervous?" Chapter 630. Gu Mengmeng was taken aback. She chuckled and said, "Burke was here just now?" Leah nodded. "When I came back, I realized that both you and Elvis were not around. I was afraid that something might have happened to you, so I went out to look for you. I met Borg, who had just returned from a hunt, and he said..." Gu Mengmeng chuckled. "You said I look very lonely sitting in the rain, as if I need someone to accompany me?" Leah hesitated for a moment before nodding. Frowning slightly, his long and narrow eyes filled with heartache. His voice was as gentle as the moonlight. His slender fingers brushed past Gu Mengmeng's face and stopped at her left ear. "My female needs someone to accompany her, and it's actually another male telling me. I must be a failure." Gu Mengmeng held Lee's hand gently and placed it on her face. With a gentle gaze, she said, "I'm just accompanying Elvis to hunt and taking the chance to relax. I'm not alone, and you're not ignoring me. I know that the reason why you've been teaching Oakley without eating or sleeping is so that you can accompany me back to St. Nazaire as soon as possible. Don't worry, I'm fine. If I really need anything, I will tell you personally. I will not let you miss the time when I need you. As for Borg..." Heh, he's just an outsider. Why should I care about what he says? Leah chuckled. That's true, he's not the real Eugene. With that, Elvis carried a big bowl of ginger water into the house and knelt down on one knee beside Gu Mengmeng. He blew on the spoon until it warmed up before sending it to Gu Mengmeng's lips. Drink some to warm up your body. Gu Mengmeng did not reject him and allowed Elvis to feed her a big bowl. After showering and drinking the ginger water, Gu Mengmeng changed into a clean set of clothes and sat at the door, staring outside in a daze. Elvis and Leah were dealing with their prey at the back of the stone house. In the rain, someone ran towards Gu Mengmeng, but stopped not too far away. He did not go any closer, nor did he leave. He just stood there and stared at Gu Mengmeng for a long time, before lowering his head and turning to leave. Gu Mengmeng recognized that person's aura. It was Burke. He should have come to see her, but since he didn't, it should be nothing important. Perhaps, he just wanted to make sure that she had returned safely. Gu Mengmeng did not greet Burke. She did not even look at him or give him any response. It was as if he was just a drop in the heavy rain, insignificant. The heavy rain continued for 13 days and Burke stared at Gu Mengmeng in the rain for 13 days. On the 14th day, the weather was clear. Gu Mengmeng stretched her arms and finally walked under the sunlight. Reaching out his hand to block the bright sun, he squinted his eyes to adjust to the light that leaked through the gaps between his fingers. She felt the weight on her waist lightening as she landed in Elvis's chest. His warm voice sounded above her head, sounding sweet and melancholic. Where do you want to go? I'll accompany you. Gu Mengmeng had not gone out for a long time, so she lazily leaned into Elvis's arms. Let's go and see Leah. If things are more or less settled, I want to return to Saint Nazaire. All right, Elvis answered softly. When Elvis carried Gu Mengmeng into the meeting room, Leah and Oakley were discussing whether to stay or leave. It was inevitable for Gu Mengmeng to return to Saint Nazaire. When they came out, the salt they brought was almost finished, so they had to return as soon as possible. But the problem now was who would follow Gu Mengmeng back to Saint Nazaire, and who would stay in Sauder to guard the branch. Out of topic, today's update had ended. It was almost March and Susu was working hard to save her chapters, preparing for the explosive update in March. My babies, please keep looking forward to it also. It was almost the end of the month, the monthly ticket would expire. Chapter 631. Mengmeng. Li's face was filled with fatigue but his eyes still lit up when he saw Gu Mengmeng. There was a chair in the main seat of the meeting room which had the feel of the Hall of Justice. Other than Gu Mengmeng, no one else dared to sit on that chair, even Leah had never sat on it before. Gu Mengmeng did not have much feelings towards such formality but Elvis would always put her in that position every time she came over so she got used to it after a while. Leah sat beside Gu Mengmeng's legs and laid on her knees to look up at her. His furry tail swayed gently and finally landed in Gu Mengmeng's arms. No matter how tired he was, he still smiled blissfully and asked, "It's rare for the weather to be clear. Why did you come to the meeting room instead of walking around?" Gu Mengmeng fiddled with Li's tail which was getting firmer by the day and looked at Oakley who had not spoken to her properly ever since her identity as the messenger of the beast deity was verified. She said, "I came to see how busy you guys are and if there's anything you need my help with." Oakley lowered his head and stood at the side respectfully. He said, "I am discussing with Mighty Leah about the candidates to follow you back to Saint Nazaire. Mighty Messenger, please tell me if there are any of them you wish to bring along or leave behind?" Gu Mengmeng looked at Oakley and did not speak for a long while. She pursed her lips and seemed to be in a trance. Back then, he used a white fox to express his goodwill to her, followed her to gather honey without knowing anything, roasted meat with Barit and Colin outside Elvis's cave and prepared rations before winter. It was as if it was just yesterday. Since when did that shy but clever Oakley become so distant and not dare to get close to her? Gu Mengmeng said, "In the past, we didn't talk like this." Oakley pursed his lips and lowered his head. "In the past, you were not the messenger of the beast deity." Gu Mengmeng sighed softly and did not say anything else. It was very difficult to maintain a basic friendship between males and females. That boundary was too difficult to grasp. Snake was the best example. Perhaps, this was already the best outcome. Without further ado, Gu Mengmeng rubbed her temples and said, "The original tribesmen of Saint Nazir can stay if they want. Those who don't, follow me back. Burke and the newly joined tribesmen must all follow me. As for the Snow Fox clan, except for Leah, everyone else will stay." Oakley frowned and thought for a moment before replying, "Other than Lord Leah, I'm afraid those few elders will be thinking too much." Gu Mengmeng chuckled and said, "Don't they like to worship the esoterica? I'll leave a set of secret manuals for them to worship, so they won't make trouble again." Oakley lifted his head and looked at Gu Mengmeng in confusion, not saying a word. Gu Mengmeng asked Oriton and Barit to bring back 2 large stone slabs. The size was comparable to the blackboards in school and the surface had been polished to be extremely smooth. Then, they dipped a branch into the ashes left over from the fire and wrote some words on the stone slab. Then, Elvis, Leah, Oriton and Barit used their sharp claws to slowly carve the inscriptions on the stone slab along the traces left by the ashes. It would take 3 days for everything to be done. Leah stared at the stone tablet for a long time, then pointed at one of the tablets and asked, "Meng Meng, what's written on it? Can you tell me?" Chapter 632. 36 Stratagems. Leah looked at Gu Mengmeng in confusion. Gu Mengmeng nodded and said, "Do you remember? You told me before that half of the esoterica in the Snow Fox tribe can only be learned by the leaders, while the other half can only be learned by the witch doctor." Leah nodded to show that he remembered. Gu Mengmeng continued, "The deduction skills you know are not from our world. Damn, it was most likely taught by the beast deity to the previous messenger, who then taught it to the witch doctor, and then passed it down from generation to generation. However, the secret manuals memorized by the leaders are very likely products of our era." Leah looked at Gu Mengmeng, then at the stone tablet that was carved with unknown symbols and said, "This 36 stratagems is one of them?" Gu Mengmeng nodded and said, "I suspect that Cole knows how to memorize this 36 stratagems." Leah asked, "Did the beast deity tell you that?" Gu Mengmeng said, "No, I guessed it." Leah did not probe further and just looked at Gu Mengmeng quietly. Gu Mengmeng walked to the front of the second stone tablet and stroked a line of words, reading slowly, 34 stratagems, the trick of injuring oneself to gain the confidence of others. If one does not harm himself, the victim must be real. False is real, true is false. The luck of childlike innocence, follow the sun. The 5 males in the house were all confused and even Leah did not understand what Gu Mengmeng was saying. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and continued, "This is one stratagem in the 36 stratagems. I have read it before but actually did not remember it. But ever since I integrated Snake's ability, everything I have seen in the past has mysteriously become very clear. It feels like, something like a photographic memory." The moment Gu Mengmeng mentioned Snake, Elvis and Leah tensed up. They were especially afraid that she would sink into that negative calmness again. So Leah pulled Gu Mengmeng's little hand and asked with a serious face, "So what does it mean? What does it have to do with Cole?" Gu Mengmeng said, "Do you still remember when Cole tricked me into coming to Sauter and in order to gain my trust, he injured himself all over to create the illusion that he was rescuing Qi Xian?" Leah nodded to show that he remembered. Gu Mengmeng said, "His injuries were so severe that he almost lost his life. It's not an exaggeration to say that his internal organs were all exposed in front of me. If you hadn't asked Dylan to contact me in advance, I would have believed that he was a good person even if I had my doubts. Now that I think about it, it was just a ruse to injure oneself to gain confidence." Leah pondered for a moment and said, "If people don't harm themselves, the victims must be real?" Gu Mengmeng nodded. "That's what I mean." Leah frowned. Then when Burke came to seek refuge, he was covered in injuries. Was that also a ruse? Gu Mengmeng shook her head. Burke did not purposely inflict those injuries. They must have been inflicted when the stray beasts attacked the tribe. Leah was silent for a moment before he said slowly, Meng Meng, I still feel that Burke is not simple. Gu Meng Meng chuckled. Cole would not go through so much trouble to send a useless person over. He must have a backup plan. Leah, I think so too. Cole was a stray beast now, why would he be so kind as to help a foreign tribe chase away stray beasts? No matter how I look at it, it doesn't seem like his style. I would rather believe it if he was the one who organized the stray beasts to attack Burke's tribe. Chapter 633. Leah was stunned, as if he suddenly thought of something. He asked, so Burke coming to seek refuge is also one of the plans? Gu Meng Meng nodded and took another step forward. She touched a line of words and said, the seventh stratagem, create something out of nothing. It was a lie, not a lie. It was all a lie. Shaoyin, Taiyin, Taiyang. Leah did not really understand the explanation in this plan, but he was sure of one thing. Gu Meng Meng knew clearly that Burke's allegiance was not simple. Elvis took a step forward and stood beside Gu Meng Meng. He frowned and said, since there's something wrong with Burke, there's no need to bring him back to St. Nazaire. I'll go there later and settle it on the spot. Gu Meng Meng held onto Elvis's arm and shook her head lightly. She took 2 steps back and pointed at another line of words. With a cold gaze, she said, the 30th stratagem, reverse the situation. Take advantage of the gap to step in, choke the host, and gradually advance. Lee's hand gently brushed past a line of words and finally met Gu Meng Meng's hand. With a light grip, he held her little hand in his palm. There was a hint of a smile in his long and narrow eyes. Meng Meng is planning to use Burke to lure Cole out? Gu Meng Meng nodded and said, although I still don't know why he inserted Burke, but there's no harm in countering his moves. If he wanted Borg to work for him, he would have to meet Borg on a regular basis and exchange information. So as long as we keep an eye on Burke, we can definitely wait for Cole. Leah held Gu Meng Meng's hand and tugged her gently towards him. Looking into her eyes, he said gently and lovingly, I know you are anxious to save Qi Xian, but you have to promise me that you will not put yourself in danger, all right? Gu Meng Meng chuckled. How long more do you need to get used to the Beast King's powers in my body? Leah shook his head, his gaze still focused on Gu Meng Meng's face. With a serious and cautious expression, he said, in terms of power, no one can match up to you. But back then when we were fighting Cole, neither Elvis nor I were his match. If Cole really knows how to use the things on the stone tablet, we have to be extra careful. Gu Meng Meng nodded, indicating that she understood. It was easy to dodge an open spear, but difficult to guard against a hidden arrow. She understood this principle. All right, let's first embed these 2 stone slabs into the wall, then cover them with animal skins. A half-arm deep groove had already been dug in the wall, and the large stone tablet was placed in it at a slight angle. Then, it was pushed and stuck inside. Gu Meng Meng shook it lightly and realized that it was still very stable. She nodded her head in satisfaction, then took out 2 large pieces of beast skin and covered the notch. Only then did he invite the elders of the Snow Fox clan in. Ever since the bonfire party, the few elders had boasted of their virtue and prestige. After a period of time, they really did seem to have some sage-like demeanor. This subordinate greets Lord Envoy. The few old foxes bowed respectfully to Gu Meng Meng. Gu Meng Meng raised her hand and went straight to the point. These 2 days, I will be bringing a portion of my tribesmen back to St. Nazaire. As for Sauter, I will leave Oakley behind to manage the overall situation. I hope that the few elders can cooperate and support him. When these words came out, the elders were all stunned. Before they could even speak, their faces were already unable to maintain their composure. Chapter 634. Gu Meng Meng's emphasis on the word trusted indeed made the elders' eyes light up and the unwillingness on their faces visibly disappeared. Gu Meng Meng gave them a look and Oriton and Barit lifted up the beast skin. The 36 stratagems, engraved on the stone tablet appeared in front of the few old foxes. The few elders' eyes widened. Although they did not recognize the words on it, they clearly knew that it was the symbol of the beast deity. Then, they hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed 9 times towards the stone tablet. Gu Mengmeng suddenly thought of the days when she worked at the amusement park. Some of the older tourists also had the same habit. They would crazily take pictures whenever they saw a stone with words on it, as if the stone was something special. However, these few were obviously crazier than the rest. Holding her forehead, Gu Mengmeng looked coldly at the few old foxes' devotion in front of the stone tablet. After they were done with their work, Gu Mengmeng then said, "Under the orders of the beast deity, the esoterica engraved here is to frighten the evil spirits and protect the people. The few elders are highly respected and are the best candidates to protect it." But Gu Mengmeng purposely dragged out her words and sized up the anxious elders from the corner of her eyes. Seeing that they were about to pounce on her, she then continued, "But Oakley is still young after all. It seems like a grievance for the few elders to stay behind and cooperate with him. Of course, although I am the messenger of the beast deity, I am also a democratic person. I respect the opinions of the elders. If you are not willing, I will not force you." An old man was the first to kneel down and prostrate himself at Gu Mengmeng's feet. He said, "We are the most loyal servants of the messenger. It is our duty to share the messenger's burden. There is no grievance, no force. Protecting the esoterica is our honor. Great messenger, please grant us our wish. I am willing to stay behind and cooperate with the witch Dr. Oakley." With one taking the lead, how could the rest be willing to fall behind? Thus, Gu Mengmeng used 2 stones to settle these few old foxes. After a round of consolation, the elders left the meeting room with tears streaming down their faces, feeling extremely gratified. Gu Mengmeng heaved a long sigh of relief. She leaned against her seat tiredly. Leah stood at the side and wrapped his arm around Gu Mengmeng's shoulders. He wrapped his arm around her neck and gently rubbed her temples. He said, "Why do you have to entertain them personally? You can leave these matters to me." Gu Mengmeng looked up with a smile. "You have been working hard for half a month so that I can return to Saint Nazaire as soon as possible. You even have dark circles under your eyes." Leah touched his eyes instinctively and asked worriedly, "Am I ugly?" Gu Mengmeng chuckled. "Didn't you claim to be the most handsome male in the world? Are you worried now?" Leah pinched Gu Mengmeng's little nose and said, "It's all because I'm afraid that you won't like me if I'm ugly." Gu Mengmeng rubbed herself in Lee's arms and said, "I left everyone from the Snow Fox clan behind. Will you feel uncomfortable?" Leah paused and shook his head. "No matter how much they flatter me now and address me as the 9th Highness, I know very well that I can no longer treat them as my own tribesmen." Gu Mengmeng looked up at Leah, her gaze filled with heartache. Chapter 635. Oakley frowned, looking like he had a lot on his mind. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. Gu Mengmeng looked up at Oakley and said, "Just say what you want to say, don't hold it in and cause internal injuries." Oakley hesitated for a moment and said, "This stone tablet, is it really all right to leave it here? What if Cole's men secretly come to snatch it?" Gu Mengmeng chuckled and said, 36 Stratagems is just an ordinary book in my world and anyone can read it. But knowing how to read and knowing how to use are 2 completely different concepts. Let's not talk about the fact that the people here don't know these words. Even if they do, how much do they know?" Oakley did not understand and asked, "Didn't you say that Cole knows how to use it?" Gu Mengmeng looked at Leah and then at Oakley and smiled. "Cole knows how to use 36 Stratagems not because he knows how to read, but because his father's generation after generation memorized it and passed it down to him. He may be smart and knows how to use it, but he is obviously not mature enough. To understand these stratagems, you need to use some historical references. 36 stratagems without any historical references is like a martial arts esoterica without any internal techniques. It's just an empty shell and won't be able to kill anyone." Oakley looked at Gu Mengmeng, not fully understanding, then at Leah. Leah rubbed Gu Mengmeng's head with a doting expression, then glanced at Oakley and said, "Listen to Gu Mengmeng's arrangements, you don't need to understand, just do as I say." Oakley still felt uneasy, but there was nothing he could do. After thinking for a long while, he looked up and asked, "If something happens in Sauter that I can't handle, how do I inform you?" Gu Mengmeng looked at the door and said softly, "Stop hiding, come in." After some rustling, a male with a feminine face walked into the meeting room. He only looked at Gu Mengmeng from the corner of his eyes and bowed politely, saying, "Saintess." Snake had made her the saintess of the Snake King Valley and announced that from the moment she took up the position, the meaning of the saintess would be different from before. Snake had originally promised her to remove this title, but it was too late. Forget it, this title was also a memento left by Snake. Anyway, no one could force her to do anything, saintess it be. "Wabi I sent you?" Gu Mengmeng asked. The snake beast nodded and replied, "Wabi I ordered us to stay by your side. If we encounter any trouble, we are to send word back to the Snake King Valley and let them resolve it." Gu Mengmeng chuckled. She knew very well that Wabi I only wanted to protect her because of Snake. "You stay in Sauter to help Oakley. If you meet with any troublesome situation, you just need a little snake to send a message to Saint Nazir," Gu Mengmeng said. The snake beast's face darkened. It glanced at Oakley and said reluctantly, "I want to guard the saint." Gu Mengmeng sneered and slowly activated the Snake King's pressure in her body. The snake beast trembled and knelt down. Its forehead was covered in sweat and it bit its lower lip, not daring to resist. Gu Mengmeng slowly retracted her pressure and said, "Keep your useless worries and obey my orders." The snake beast replied with a trembling voice, "Yes." Gu Mengmeng stood up and Elvis carried her up. When he passed by Oakley, Gu Mengmeng said, "If there are no other problems, I will set off for Saint Nazir 3 days later." Chapter 636. After exiting the meeting room, she saw Hada and his brothers playing with Qi Xian at the entrance. When they saw Gu Mengmeng coming out, they all pounced on her. "Mummy." Kanwu was the first to reach Gu Mengmeng. He raised his little face and asked, "Are we going home?" Gu Mengmeng wanted to get down from Elvis's arms, but Elvis hugged her even tighter. He looked down at Kanwu from above and did not say a single word, but there was an aura of, "Hurry and get lost." Gu Mengmeng knew that Elvis was competing with Kanwu again. But she could not embarrass him in front of his son. So she patted Kanwu's little head and replied gently, "Yes, we will set off in 3 days. Are you happy?" Kanwu also completely ignored Elvis. He nodded and said, "I'm happy. I can participate in the hunt with the big tribe on the way back." Jiaoyu also chimed in. "Yes, there are not so many things to do on the way back. Daddy Leah will have time to teach me the art of deduction." Hada looked at Qi Xian in his arms. He smiled especially amiably and had a maturity that did not match his age. "Will you wake up when we return to a familiar place?" Gu Mengmeng looked at Qi Xian without saying a word. She was silently calculating in her heart. What was Cole planning by pushing Burke to her side? Everything had a motive. So what was Cole's motive? It seemed like she had to start with Burke to capture Cole. Gu Mengmeng turned back to look at Barit. "Call Burke over." Barit nodded. He did not say a word. He just turned around and walked towards the edge of Sauter. Oriton followed for 2 steps before looking up at Gu Mengmeng. He said expressionlessly, "I will go hunt and then share a meal." Gu Mengmeng chuckled. "There are so many beauties in Sauter. Have you not taken a liking to any of them?" Oriton did not seem to understand what Gu Mengmeng meant. He looked at her in a daze. He did not speak or move. Gu Mengmeng said, "Find a suitable female to start a family with. It's not a good idea to always share a meal with me." Oriton said, "I am your guardian beast. I cannot start a family with other females." Gu Mengmeng shook her head. "You don't like me, do you?" Oriton lowered his head slightly, as if he was thinking seriously. Then he shook his head and said, "I like you." Gu Mengmeng was slightly surprised and asked, "You like me? What do you like about me?" Oriton replied very seriously, "Your family's food is the best." Gu Mengmeng was taken aback for a moment before she suddenly laughed. Their personalities are so different, but why are they so similar in terms of gluttony? Oriton did not know what Gu Mengmeng was smiling about. He turned to look at Elvis and realized that his face was filled with gentleness. His pair of blue eyes curved into a curve as Gu Mengmeng smiled. Oriton could not really understand the feeling of having all his emotions affected by a female. He did not know if all females had this ability or only Gu Mengmeng had this ability. For someone like him who had almost forgotten his emotions, who knew if he could be saved if he mated with Gu Mengmeng? One day in the future, would she be able to smile unknowingly like Elvis? Chapter 637. Gu Mengmeng did not insist any further. She no longer had the passion she had when she helped Sandy and Colin build the bridge. She did not want to interfere too much in other people's lives. When Elvis carried Gu Mengmeng back to the stone house, Barit and Burke were already waiting at the door. Barit straightened his back when he saw Gu Mengmeng. His long, soldier-like face had become even more resolute in the past 2 months and he was even more taciturn. It was as if other than in front of Gu Mengmeng, he did not even open his mouth to speak much. "I've brought her." Barit opened his mouth, as if he was reporting for work, concise and to the point. With that, he returned to stand behind Elvis and continued his role as the messenger's guard. He did not speak much and did not steal the limelight. If one did not look closely, he would look like a background version of Gu Mengmeng. Elvis carried Gu Mengmeng and sat on the stone steps at the door. Leah swayed his tail and walked past Burke. He paused for a moment and chuckled. He did not say anything and just walked to the simple stove to start a fire. Gu Mengmeng sat in Elvis's arms lazily. She glanced sideways at Burke and smiled. 3 days later, I will be returning to St. Nazaire. You and your tribesmen can follow me back. Burke clenched his fists by the sides of his body and slowly released them. He did not dare to look straight at Gu Mengmeng and could only stare at her shadow that was elongated by the sun. Frowning, he replied, "Can we stay in Sauter? My tribesmen are already too old, they cannot withstand the frequent travel." Gu Mengmeng was taken aback. "You're not coming with me?" Gu Mengmeng asked. Could it be that Cole's motive for arranging for Burke to come here was not for her but to regain control of Sauter? Burke shook his head with difficulty. "I want to go with you, but if I leave, there will be no one to provide food for my tribesmen." Originally, the 2 half-orc females in our tribe could recruit family members through mating after joining a new tribe and continue to take care of our tribesmen. But Sauter did not lack females at all. How could 2 half-orc females snatch resources from the group of complete females who were at the top of the tribes? Even Maya and Sandy, who were considered average-level half-orc females, did not manage to recruit a single new member after coming to Sauter, let alone the old, weak, sick and disabled who were burdened with their entire families. Of course, Sandy was very satisfied with Colin and wouldn't give any other male a chance. Otherwise, just based on her identity as the best friend of the messenger of the beast deity, there would still be people who would be willing to mate with her. Gu Mengmeng nodded and did not force him. "Since that's the case, I won't force you. You can go back." Burke secretly lifted his eyes and stared deeply at Gu Mengmeng. Her lonely appearance in the rain made him toss and turn in bed, unable to sleep. He couldn't tell if what he saw on her face that day were tears or rain, but those clear eyes were calm without a trace of emotion. It made his heart ache and made him want to protect her. If he could, he wanted to stay by her side regardless of everything. He didn't want to let her sit alone in the rain, and he didn't want her to have any time to be lonely. But, in the end, Burke only replied with a "okay." He then turned around and left with heavy footsteps. Chapter 638. Leah put down the work in his hands and walked to Gu Mengmeng's side. He hooked Gu Mengmeng's chin with his slender fingers and squinted his eyes with a resentful expression. "You are so familiar with his scent, why do I feel so unhappy?" This meant that Gu Mengmeng did not smell wrongly. Chuckling, Gu Mengmeng glanced sideways at Barit and said, "Seems like you have to stay behind this time." Barit turned his head and looked at the direction where Burke had disappeared to. "Stay behind and watch him?" Gu Mengmeng shook her head and said, "Stay behind and help me protect Oakley. If he loses control, at least the two of you have to run back to St. Nazir alive." Barit retracted his gaze and looked at Gu Mengmeng. He pursed his lips and finally replied, "All right." But Leah did not give up. He pinched Gu Mengmeng's chin back and looked straight into her eyes. "What do you plan to do after you catch him?" Gu Mengmeng laughed softly and said, "I also don't know, how far can I go for my son?" Leah raised his head and asked, "What if he requests to be your beast pet? Will you agree to him for Qishuan's sake?" Gu Mengmeng looked up and stared straight into Lee's eyes. "Beast pet? I'm afraid he doesn't have the guts to make such a request." Leah continued asking, "What if he does? What do you plan to do?" Gu Mengmeng's shoulders trembled as she smiled sinisterly. Her gaze was cold as she said, "If he does, I'll agree to him. Let's see if he has the life to enjoy the poison in my body." Gu Mengmeng frowned as she felt a slight pain in her chin and shoulder. But she did not resist. Elvis's voice exploded above her head like a subwoofer, hitting Gu Mengmeng's heart with every word. "I'm not dead yet." Leah held Gu Mengmeng's little face. There was a smile on his devilish and fairy-like face, but why did it look like a layer of ice had formed on his smile? "I'm still alive too." Gu Mengmeng smiled embarrassedly. I know. I was just saying casually." Lee's smile grew colder and colder. Even though his voice was calm, it gave off an oppressive feeling as if a storm was brewing. It was as if the air pressure within a radius of 100 meters around Leah had been pulled down. His body leaned forward slightly and his entire body enveloped Gu Mengmeng. His long and narrow eyes were filled with a dangerous and fatal seductive aura. His dark red lips parted slightly, bringing with it a unique fragrance, just like the flowers on the other shore, causing one's imagination to run wild. "The two of us are not so useless that we need to sacrifice our own females to solve the problem." Leah was only a third-level beast, right? Gu Mengmeng was uncertain for a moment. Was her power above Lee's now? Gu Mengmeng. Gu. Mengmeng, S and Gu, S. Her lips were sealed by Elvis and his tongue entered her mouth, robbing her of all the fragrance. Gu Mengmeng felt a numbing sensation on her neck. She glanced sideways and realized that Leah was nibbling on her neck. His strength was neither light nor heavy. It was slightly painful but not injurious. It was filled with lust and punishment. After a long while, when Gu Mengmeng's entire body turned limp, the two of them released her in unison. Chapter 639. Barit is still watching. "You too. Stop fooling around." Gu Mengmeng could not even complete her sentence. Elvis and Leah were messing around with her body as if they had planned it beforehand, causing her heart to beat erratically. Barit silently lowered his head and said, "I'll go to Oakley's and inform him." Barit only left Gu Mengmeng with a resolute back view. He liked Gu Mengmeng, he had liked her ever since she came to the tribe. But he knew that protecting her as a guard was already the closest he could get. Elvis and Leah would not give him a chance to improve. If he was too greedy, the two of them would definitely not tolerate him. So, knowing when to leave was the only way for him to stay by her side. After Barit left, Elvis and Leah finally let Gu Mengmeng off after she repeatedly begged for mercy. "Don't say such things again. Or else I will personally kill Qishuan," Elvis said coldly. Gu Mengmeng pursed her lips, her gaze cold. This was the second time he said he wanted to kill her sons. Previously, it was Kanwu, this time it was Qishuan. Why were her sons so lowly in his eyes? Elvis seemed to know what Gu Mengmeng was thinking about. He straightened her body and made her sit face to face with him. Then, he said cautiously, compared to you, everything else in this world is insignificant. So is the tribe, so is my sons, and so am I. You have become like this because of them, and that is the limit of my tolerance. If you continue to place yourself as a sacrifice for them, I can only kill them personally to protect you. If you dare to touch my sons, I will hate you. Gu Mengmeng's face was filled with anger as she said unhappily. Elvis smiled bitterly and said, I know. If you hate me, I will live a life worse than death. But compared to you, my pain is not worth mentioning. Gu Mengmeng lowered her head and looked at her own knees. This pair of legs were exchanged for by Snake's life. She knew better than anyone else how stubborn the males in the beast world were in love, wasn't that so? If you want, Leah and I are willing to risk our lives to accompany you for one night. Elvis hooked Gu Mengmeng's lips and kissed her lips. Different from the punishment kiss just now, this kiss was extremely gentle. After the kiss, Gu Mengmeng even felt that her brain was lacking oxygen and her breathing was not smooth. Elvis hugged her shoulders and placed her on his chest. While giving her support, he did not let her discover the wound in his eyes. If you want a few more partners, Barit, Oriton, and Ian are all good choices. But, don't let it be Cole. He's not worthy. Gu Mengmeng leaned into Elvis's arms and chuckled. I know, I don't want any more partners and I won't take Colin as a beast pet. It's just something I said in a moment of anger. Why take it so seriously? Leah squatted in front of Gu Mengmeng with one knee on the ground. He placed Gu Mengmeng's little hand by his lips and kissed it. Then, he looked straight into Gu Mengmeng's eyes and said, if it can make you happy, we don't mind having a few more family members. It didn't matter if it was a partner or a pet, as long as it could make you happy. But, don't let it be Cole, he's too dangerous and dirty. Gu Mengmeng smiled and said, you and Elvis are enough for me. I don't need any more partners or beast pets. Barit, Oriton, Ian, I don't want any of them. Cole. Needless to say. Don't worry, alright? Aside from the topic. Chapter 640. 3 days later, Gu Mengmeng set off for St. Nazaire. Other than Oakley and Barit, the rest of the St. Nazaire tribesmen who had migrated over during the attack on Cole followed Gu Mengmeng. A few of the snow foxes also wanted to follow Gu Mengmeng back to St. Nazaire, but were stopped by Leah using the 2 stone tablets. The 16 valued females, Maya and Sandy, 18 big families and some single males who had yet to mate, walked out of Sauter's main entrance in a majestic manner. Looking back, Oakley, Barit and the snake beast sent by Wabi were standing at the door like abandoned dogs, looking at them from afar. Gu Mengmeng sighed softly and turned back. Elvis tightened his arms around her waist and asked, worried? Gu Mengmeng nodded and said, Barit is just a 3rd-level beast. If he really meets Cole, he can't even protect himself, how can he protect Oakley? I just feel, it's too risky. Elvis said, should we send someone to the Snake King Valley to send a message and invite Wabi over to protect them in secret? Gu Mengmeng thought for a moment and shook her head, saying, let's not talk about how Cole wouldn't dare to show himself if Wabi is around. Also, with Wabi's temper. I'm afraid that Barit and Oakley will die in Wabi's hands before Cole arrives. Leah walked beside Elvis and held Gu Mengmeng's little hand, saying, if you are really worried, I will call the 2 of them over and return to St. Nazaire together. Let's leave Sauter to those few old things. If Cole's motive is to snatch Sauter back, then it would be more beneficial for Cole if the 2 of them are not around. Gu Mengmeng shook her head and said, Cole clearly knows that I have already found out that Burke was instigated by him to come to Sauter. If I am not prepared at all, it will only arouse his suspicions. Elvis said slowly, being too perfect in itself is a loophole. Gu Mengmeng nodded and did not say a word. She just went through the plan again in her mind and tried to think through the details more clearly so that she could deal with it. The speed of the large group was much slower than when Elvis, Leah, and Gu Mengmeng were traveling alone. Females were delicate and could not stand the long journey. Although they had experienced it last time and were much better this time, the morning's journey had made them complain incessantly. Gu Mengmeng was not really in a hurry to rush back to Saint Nazaire, so she found a better place in the forest in the afternoon and ordered them to rest on the spot. The males went hunting while the females gathered around Gu Mengmeng. On the other hand, their partners could only sit on the outermost edge of the females' group to protect her. They couldn't even get close to their own female. Even Elvis and Leah were pushed out by these females. Gu Mengmeng gave them a reassuring smile, then sat among the group of females and chatted with them to soothe their emotions. Great messenger, I've heard Sandy talk about you and Jean before, but I'm still very curious. Can you tell us more? The one speaking was Mandy, the first beauty of the beast world that Gu Mengmeng had chosen. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and shook her head. You guys have heard the story of Jean so many times, aren't you sick of it? Mandy's eyes brightened. She leaned closer to Gu Mengmeng and asked, Great messenger, from what you said, does it mean that you have other stories to tell us? Gu Mengmeng chuckled. Looking at the 18 pairs of big eyes that were shining with anticipation, she could only nod her head and say, Yeah, let me tell you a short story. The beginning of the story was about a fish that fell in love with a flying bird. Digression, the story of the bird and fish. A long, long time ago, a fish and a bird fell in love. But God told them that they would never be lovers. Even becoming friends was an extravagant wish. Even if they loved each other, this lifetime was unattainable. The fish hated the restraints of the seawater and longed for the feeling of being free and aloof in the blue sky. The bird hated the empty blue sky and longed to bathe in the seawater and walk in it. Chapter 641. Although it was a story, it was actually just a script for a play that Gu Mengmeng had performed in the past when she was working at the amusement park. The entire play was about 40 minutes long, but with Gu Mengmeng narrating it alone, it was at most 10 minutes long. The people who went hunting returned one after another. From afar, Gu Mengmeng could see her 2 meat buns mixed in with the group. Jialia stayed behind to take care of Qi Xian and pestered Leah to tell him some deductions, so he did not go hunting with them. Meanwhile, Heda and Canwu followed the rest of the group. Seeing her sons, Gu Mengmeng's expression became much gentler. She clapped her hands and said, All right ladies, today's story ends here. Everyone go back to your own males and have a good rest. After dinner, we will continue our journey in the afternoon. The females still wanted to hear more stories, but did not dare to pester them too much. Mandy and Sandy each took the lead to evacuate a few females before the rest of the group dispersed one after another. Mandy stood behind Gu Mengmeng, feeling rather bashful. She tugged at Gu Mengmeng's skirt and asked softly, That flying bird that fell in love with the fish, is it Ian? Gu Mengmeng was stunned for a moment, before shaking her head in exasperation. Everything about the beast world was good, except for this habit of letting one's imagination run wild. Gu Mengmeng gently held Mandy's shoulders and said, That's just a story, don't think too much about it. Hurry and go back. Your males are still waiting. Mandy nodded, but her eyes secretly peeked up at the treetops. Gu Mengmeng knew that this clearly meant that Ian was one of the main characters in the story. Forget it, let her fantasize all she wants. After sending Mandy off, the 2 meat buns that had returned from hunting ran to Gu Mengmeng. Mummy, here. Canwu's speed was always faster. Although Heda was the big brother, he was not Canwu's match in terms of stamina. When Canwu ran to Gu Mengmeng, Heda was still 5 to 6 meters behind him. Gu Mengmeng looked at the dead rabbit and gently rubbed Canwu's head, saying, Canwu is really awesome. Rabbits were agile, so it was very difficult to catch them. You are really amazing. Canwu was extremely enraged after receiving the compliment. His azure blue eyes seemed to stare at Elvis. He clearly had a young and tender face, but it had an inexplicable sense of provocation. Elvis clenched his teeth and walked to Canwu's side. He grabbed the back of his neck and lifted him up to eye level, saying coldly, Don't you know the rules? Canwu bared his fangs and brandished his claws, but he could not even touch a single strand of Elvis's hair. Gritting his teeth, he said, The prey is for my mother, it's fine as long as my mother likes it. Why are you so nosy? Elvis pinched Kanwa's face and forcefully turned his head to look at the dead rabbit. Then, he said coldly, word by word, do you think my wife would like that ugly piece of trash whose skin and flesh were all torn apart? Kanwa's face twitched. Kanwa choked and could not say a word. It was his first time participating in a hunt, and that rabbit was indeed too cunning, so, his death was a little tragic, but he still felt indignant after hearing Elvis's words. Kanwa's eyes lit up. Seeing that her son was about to cry from Elvis's words, Kanwa did not want to cry at all. It was purely his mother's imagination. Gu Mengmeng hurriedly stood up and grabbed the rabbit's ears. She chuckled, ha, ha ha. I really want to eat rabbits today. Not bad, not bad. Aside from the topic, the story of bird and fish, the fish did not want to give up because it felt the blue sky calling it. The bird did not want to give up because it felt that the sea was its true home. Just like that, the fish and the bird kept trying to get closer, but in the process of getting closer to their dreams, they were getting closer to death. The fish said to the bird, you were originally in the sky, you should be flying around. The bird said to the fish, you were originally in the sea, you should be swimming around. The fish said to the bird, if birds and fish can love each other, then where should we build our nests? The fish's tears fell into the sea. The bird said to the fish, look at me, I will tell you the answer. The bird flew up into the sky for the last time. Chapter 642. Elvis casually threw Kanwa aside and took over the bloody rabbit from Gu Mengmeng's hands. I'll help you hunt a giant rabbit, Gu Mengmeng nudged Elvis's chest lightly and said softly, it's my son's first time hunting and he gave me his prey. Can you not hurt our child? Elvis raised his brow. It's already not good, can't I tell the truth? Gu Mengmeng looked at Elvis in rebuke. Elvis took a deep breath and wiped off the blood on Gu Mengmeng's fingers. You're glaring at me because of him again. I really hate them more and more. Gu Mengmeng said, hubby. Kanwa walked forward and hugged Gu Mengmeng's thigh. He raised his little face and said seriously, Mummy, don't be sad. It's alright if he hates me, I don't like him anyway. Gu Mengmeng's lips twitched, they were really biological father and son. Identification complete. Elvis ignored Kanwa and only instructed Leah before running into the depths of the forest. Hada held onto a wild bird's neck and stood 2 steps away. He was hesitating if he should go closer. Gu Mengmeng waved her hand and called Hada over. She touched his sweaty little face and asked, what did you hunt? Let Mummy take a look too. Hada placed the wild bird in front of Gu Mengmeng. My prey is not even as good as Kanwa's, Gu Mengmeng chuckled. Both of you are great. It's already not bad to have such results on your first hunt. Hada said, but Beast Father said. Gu Mengmeng pinched the cheeks of her 2 sons. Beast Father is using his own method to motivate you and hope that you can do better. Don't be sad. He doesn't really despise you. Kanwa sighed and acted like a little adult. He ran away after getting into trouble and still needs Mummy to help him clean up. Sigh, when can he be more reliable? Gu Mengmeng laughed at Kanwa's words. She hugged him and kissed him. Beast Father is afraid that we don't have enough food, so he went to replenish our prey. Kanwa hugged Gu Mengmeng's neck and kissed her on the cheek. Then, he looked at Gu Mengmeng seriously with his azure blue eyes and said, forget it, don't help him explain. You already have enough troubles with such an unreliable first partner. But it doesn't matter. The 4 of us will grow up as soon as possible. At that time, you don't have to count on him. The 4 of us will protect you. Gu Mengmeng chuckled and nodded. Alright, I'll wait for my precious sons to grow up and protect me. Leah swayed his big tail as he held Jiaoyu's hand and walked over. With a light flick of his hand, Jiaoyu carried Qixuan and stood together with Hada and Kanwa. Leah slowly squatted down beside Gu Mengmeng, wrapping his furry tail around her waist and pulling her into his arms. Resting his chin on his hands, he smiled amiably and said, Brat, are you seducing my female? Gu Mengmeng's face darkened. She slapped Lee's face and said, "Watch your words. He is my son." Kanwa sighed and shook his head. He placed one hand on Gu Mengmeng's shoulder and said earnestly, "Mummy, why don't you consider taking in a few more normal males? Like Bode or Colin from mother-in-law's family. Those who are not sick in the head." Chapter 643. Lee's nonchalant words made Yuan Sherwu's hair stand on end. Today was the first time he had gone hunting with his tribesmen. It was nerve-wracking and exciting. Although he had only hunted a small rabbit and, there was still a lot of room for improvement in his skills, but he had received a compliment from his mother. Not allowing him to go hunting from now on? Why not just chop off his 4 limbs and be done with it? He bared his teeth at Leah, looking like he was about to explode. He felt that if Leah was not carrying Gu Mengmeng in his arms, Kanwa would definitely pounce on him and bite him. Jiaoyu tugged at Kanwa lightly and whispered something into his ear. Kanwa paused for a moment and smiled sneakily for a second. Then, he instantly lost his temper and sat on the ground. He lifted his little face and looked at Gu Mengmeng with a pair of watery blue eyes, melting Gu Mengmeng's heart. He sniffled and pouted, looking like he was about to cry but could not. "Mummy, do you not like the little rabbit I hunted? You also despise the prey I gave you, right?" So, whoa. Jiaoyu's little scheme was too obvious in Gu Mengmeng's eyes. But seeing through everything did not stop her from feeling sorry for her son. Gu Mengmeng pinched Leah and struggled out of his arms to hug Kanwu. She comforted him softly. "Kanwu, be good. Kanwu, don't cry. Mummy really likes the prey Kanwu gave to Mummy. You have done very well. Mummy is proud of you." Kanwa said, Whoa, but I can't hunt anymore for Mummy, sob. Can I no longer receive Mummy's compliments? Can I no longer take care of Mummy? Then I will be abandoned by Mummy and become a wild wolf that no one wants. Sob. Mummy. Kanwa's unreasonable crying was, strictly speaking, illogical. But which mother in this world would not feel heartwarming when she heard her son trying so hard to take care of her, trying so hard to prove his capabilities in front of her? Gu Mengmeng patted Kanwa's back lightly. Then, she tilted her head and stood on Kanwa's side without any principles. She glared at Leah and said with slight annoyance, "It's fine if Elvis is like this, but why are you like this too? What's the point of abusing your power to threaten a kid?" Leah was stunned for a moment after being scolded by Gu Mengmeng. He then smiled brightly and leaned his handsome face in front of Gu Mengmeng, the tip of his nose touching Gu Mengmeng's, as if he could not wait to see Gu Mengmeng in his eyes. The 2 pure white fox ears on the top of his head twitched twice, his voice ambiguous and excited. The moment he opened his thin lips, Lee's unique warm breath sprayed onto Gu Mengmeng's face, making her feel sentimental. "Mengmeng, you look so attractive when you are angry." Gu Mengmeng blushed at Lee's actions and instinctively took a step back. But Leah did not give up. His large tail quickly occupied her waist and pulled her towards him. He supported the back of her head with one hand and slid his other hand down her arm to her palm. He opened his fingers and slipped them through the gaps between her fingers. With one grip, all 10 fingers were locked tightly. "If you're angry, do you want me to pull your ears?" Gu Mengmeng's entire body stiffened from Lee's actions, but she did not know what to do. She turned around to seek help from her sons, only to see Jiaoyu sigh and pat Kanwu, saying, "Forget it, don't bother with a masochist. A normal person will never win against a lunatic." Chapter 644. The 4 sons sighed and walked away quietly. Gu Mengmeng face-bombed. What happened to the promised fatherly love and tall and lofty image? Why were these 2 fellows in her family disliked by their sons one after another? Was there really something wrong with her taste in men? Gu Mengmeng felt a deep sadness. Elvis did not need too much time to hunt, so not long after the 4 little ones left, Elvis was already carrying a huge rabbit that was 3 times the size of his human form back. Gu Mengmeng felt it was quite novel to see a whole prey after such a long time. Pushing Leah away, Gu Mengmeng walked to Elvis and looked at the owner who had purposely placed his prey beside Kanwa's little rabbit. Then, Elvis prodded the huge rabbit's skull with one hand and placed his palm on his temple. He sighed and said, "Is it a sense of achievement to win against your own sons?" Elvis hugged Gu Mengmeng into his arms and kissed her forehead gently. Then, he said, "We have to let him know who is the boss in this family." Gu Mengmeng shook her head helplessly and said, "Do you know that you and Leah are already two perverts in our sons' hearts?" Elvis shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly and said, "Let them think whatever they want, I don't care." Gu Mengmeng sighed helplessly and accepted her fate. She did not force it. Leah leaned over and placed one hand on Elvis's shoulder while the other hand stroked his own tail in boredom. He said, I was reprimanded just now." Elvis frowned and looked at Leah with a serious expression. He asked, "Really? Xiao Meng reprimanded you?" Lee's eyes lit up and he nodded his head excitedly. It was as if being scolded was an extremely honorable thing. Elvis was also a little agitated. He asked, "Anything else? Did you take action?" Lee's gaze darkened and he shook his head dejectedly. "No." Elvis also sighed softly and said regretfully, "Forget it, it's already not easy to lose your temper and reprimand someone. This is a good thing. Maybe we can take action next time." A thick sign was flashing on Gu Mengmeng's forehead. No wonder her sons said that they were psychopaths who had masochistic tendencies. It was one thing for him to think of ways to make her happy every day, but now he had given up on himself to the point where he could be proud of making her angry. Gu Mengmeng took 2 steps forward and stretched out her 2 little black hands. She grabbed Elvis's ears with her left hand and Lee's right and pulled them towards her. She asked with a smile, "How is it? Are you satisfied?" The eyes of the wolf and fox, whose ears had been twisted, lit up. They were like lottery winners sitting in front of the TV who had won the first prize. He hugged Gu Mengmeng excitedly, one black and one white, sandwiching Gu Mengmeng in the middle, forming a human wolf-fox sandwich. I can't breathe." Gu Mengmeng roared with a face full of despair. Elvis and Leah then calmed down and released her. Leah held on to Gu Mengmeng's shoulders and said, "That's great, Gu Mengmeng, you can finally be angry. During this period of time, you haven't laughed or made a fuss. It's making my heart ache. It's good that you're angry. It's good that you have mood swings. I'll go cook for you. It'll be ready soon." With that, Leah kissed Gu Mengmeng's face heavily. Then, he swayed his tail and went to deal with the giant rabbit. It was not an exaggeration to say that Gu Mengmeng saw countless blooming flowers spinning around Leah. Chapter 645. After 3 days of journey, they had already covered half of the distance from Sadr to Saint Nazaire. The closer they were to Saint Nazaire, the more uneasy Gu Mengmeng felt. She always felt that there was a pair of eyes watching her in the dark, but she couldn't find anyone when she checked in private. Even Ian, who was hovering in the air, did not notice anything suspicious, so Gu Mengmeng could not help but attribute it all to homesickness. At night, a bright moon hung in the sky. The bright moonlight revealed a trace of coldness, like a white gauze curtain enveloping everything in the night. The verdant and tall ancient trees exuded a strange atmosphere in the darkness, causing people to involuntarily feel a sense of awe. Everything was quiet. It was a night suitable for a good sleep. Suddenly, a shrill howl tore apart the silence. Gu Mengmeng opened her eyes abruptly. Elvis and Leah had already stood on her left and right, protecting her securely. Gu Mengmeng frowned and asked, "What's going on?" Elvis gave Leah a look and Leah immediately leaped out and started to control the scene. With families as units, the males surrounded their females in the middle to protect them. Elvis looked around warily as he replied, "They are stray beasts." Stray beasts. Gu Mengmeng's knowledge of these 3 words was limited. She only knew that it was an exiled orc, cold-blooded and heartless. The only time she had seen it was not long after they had mated. A few stray beasts were lured into the cave by her singing. Elvis was severely injured and unconscious at that time. Leah stayed in her cave. Gu Mengmeng felt a wave of disgust as she recalled the scenes of them eating her comrades. Frowning, he asked, "Can't we just expel it with our beast pressure?" Elvis said, "If it's only the two of us, this method would be the simplest and most effective." But Elvis's gaze swept across the crowd, especially the 18-week females, who were so frightened by the stray beast's voice that they almost burst into tears. "If we release our beast pressure, before the stray beasts are scared away, half of them would be scared to death." Gu Mengmeng frowned in frustration and sighed. "Go and help Leah. Do your best to protect the tribesmen. Don't worry about me. No one in the beast world is my match now." Elvis hesitated for a moment but still nodded his head. He did not care what would happen to Saint Nazir, but he knew that she cared. Elvis and Leah arranged the defense as quickly as possible based on their tacit understanding. Ian led the Eagle Owl tribe and circled twice in the sky. With a caw, they pointed out the enemy's location. Elvis frowned and cursed softly, "Damn it, we're already surrounded." Elvis, Leah, and Oriton formed a triangle and guarded the outermost edge. Ian led the Eagle Owl tribe to control the overall situation in the air, waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Gu Mengmeng narrowed her eyes and clenched her fists tightly. She looked at the pairs of ghostly green eyes closing in on her from all directions. There were quite a few of them, and they were all level 3 or 4. Releasing beast pressure was the simplest method, but the fighting members would definitely fall to the ground before the other side. What to do? While Gu Mengmeng was thinking, the battle had already begun. Chapter 646. 7 to 8 4th-level orcs were trapping Elvis tightly. Elvis could not casually unleash his beast pressure, or else the beast pressure from these few 4th-level beasts would be enough to suppress 80% of his fighting power. Physical combat was the only way out. But even though he was strong, it was not easy for him to escape from the stray beast's reckless fighting style. Leah maintained absolute calmness during the battle. Even though it was a little strenuous for him to face 2 3rd-level orcs, he did not retreat a single step and defended a corner with all his might. The Eagle Owl tribe led by Ian circled in the sky, occasionally swooping down to catch a stray beast that was alone. Then, they would quickly return to the sky and use their sharp claws to tear the stray beasts to shreds before landing heavily on the ground. Oriton was used to the stray beast's fighting style, so he was evenly matched with a 4th-level orc. No one had the upper hand. Colin and Sandy had leveled up to 3rd level after mating. Perhaps it was because he did not participate in the previous battle, he seemed to be fighting with all his might this time. But the difference in levels was absolute. Against a 4th-level stray beast, Colin's body was quickly covered in wounds of varying degrees. The rest also fought fiercely with their families as a unit. The scene was bloody and violent, with broken limbs flying in front of Gu Mengmeng's eyes. She thought she would be afraid, but the heat in her heart was not fear, but excitement. She wanted to participate in the battle, and even tear the enemies apart with her own hands. Gu Mengmeng was very clear that this excitement did not belong to her, but to Snake's boiling blood that had settled in her body. Sandy's face was pale with fright, and she clutched tightly onto the corner of Gu Mengmeng's clothes, unwilling to let go. Gu Mengmeng pursed her lips and stuffed the bun that was guarding her in place of Elvis into Sandy's arms, saying, "Help me look after these 4. Lowering her head, Gu Mengmeng was stunned for a moment. Then, an explosion sounded in her head, as if a bolt of lightning had struck her brain. "Where's Kanwu?" Gu Mengmeng asked angrily. Hada carried Qi Xian in his arms, shielding Jiaoyu behind him. He was clearly very afraid, but he still had to pretend to be calm and protect his brother. Hearing Gu Mengmeng's question, he then realized that Kanwu had disappeared. He looked around frantically, but there was killing and blood everywhere. Hada's tiny body kept trembling, as if his throat was locked. He could not say a single word. Gu Mengmeng frowned and squatted down to look straight at Hada. She held on to his little shoulders and said, "Hada, Mummy is going to look for Kanwu now. You are the eldest, you have to take good care of your younger brothers. Before Mom comes back, find a place to hide and protect yourself and Aunt Sandy, okay? Hada trembled and nodded, clearly afraid but still determined. He was the eldest brother, and he could not be weak at this time. Gu Mengmeng looked up at Sandy and said, "Help me take care of the child, I will be back soon." Sandy nodded with much difficulty, tears welling up in her eyes. She was clearly so scared that she wanted to cry, but she still let go of Gu Mengmeng's hand. Biting her lips, she reminded, "You have to be careful." Gu Mengmeng did not hear Sandy's reminder. Because after leaving that sentence, Gu Mengmeng had already turned and dashed into the battlefield filled with killing. She did not have sharp fangs or claws, but she opened up a bloody path. As she walked past, she accurately slapped all the stray beasts to the ground. Chapter 647. Gu Mengmeng's eyes kept searching for Kanwa's figure amidst the chaotic killing. A wild jackal with bloodshot eyes leaped up after biting off an orc's throat, pouncing towards Gu Mengmeng. Gu Mengmeng's eyes did not see the incoming danger. Instead, her body reacted instinctively based on Risnella's battle memories. She lifted one leg in an instant, and the moment her height exceeded the jackal, she slammed it down harshly. Her heel directly smashed onto the jackal's nose, creating a huge pit when it landed on the ground. Gu Mengmeng did not lower her head to look, but continued searching for Kanwu. The jackal only had half a head left, and its brain matter was splattered everywhere. However, no one showed any mercy. Gu Mengmeng did not emit her beast pressure but still attracted the attention of the stray beasts like a magnet. Perhaps it was because a female walking around in the battlefield was too eye-catching that the stray beasts all resorted to extreme attacks to get rid of the entanglement in front of them. They then surrounded Gu Mengmeng in twos and threes. Elvis was afraid that Gu Mengmeng would be hurt. His eyes were bloodshot and he could not care less about hurting himself. He released his beast pressure and instantly suppressed the few fourth-level orcs surrounding him. He then quickly ran to Gu Mengmeng's side and protected her in his arms. "Why did you run out? Are you hurt?" Gu Mengmeng's gaze was still darting around. She said anxiously, "Kanwu is missing. I want to find him." Elvis frowned and his eyes shone fiercely. "You are putting yourself in danger for that little wolf pup again." Gu Mengmeng pushed Elvis's hand away. She raised her leg and kicked away the stray beast that had recovered from Elvis's beast pressure and was about to attack her from behind. She then shook her head and looked at Elvis. "This level of attack is not dangerous to me." Elvis clenched his teeth and said harshly, "The most regretful thing I have done in my life is to let you give birth to them." Elvis carried Gu Mengmeng by the waist and spun her around to protect her against his chest. He turned around abruptly and glared at the bloody beast less than an inch away from his neck with his bloodshot eyes. He squeezed out 2 words through his teeth. "You're courting death." The thick tail was like a steel whip as it viciously lashed at the waist of the ambusher. The stray beast was sent flying 7 to 8 steps away, its intestines and innards scattered along the way, finally disappearing into the bloody ground. Gu Mengmeng separated herself from Elvis's arms and said, "Let's split up and search. We must find Kanwu safe and sound. I can't have another son whose life is uncertain." Elvis really wanted to bite Kanwu to death after finding him, but when he met Gu Mengmeng's worried eyes, he still nodded. He frowned and said, "You're not allowed to get hurt." Gu Mengmeng nodded in agreement. "I know. You be careful too." With that, Gu Mengmeng continued to look for Kanwu in another direction. On the other hand, Elvis clenched his fists and forced himself to turn around as well. He wanted to find that bastard son who was courting death on the battlefield as soon as possible. Only then could Gu Mengmeng stay at the back with peace of mind and not enter this filthy and bloody battlefield. A white figure flashed into Gu Mengmeng's eyes. The snow fox that was supposed to be spotlessly white was now covered in a sinister red color. Its flesh was flipped and blood was flowing out. Leah was injured. Chapter 648. If this bite landed, even if Leah did not die, he would be severely injured. At that critical moment, Gu Mengmeng clenched her fists tightly and her body shook. Instantly, the world shook and everything started to double up. No matter what level the orcs were at, they all fell to the ground at the same time. Worry and fear controlled Gu Mengmeng's emotions. She released her beast pressure unconsciously and did not even realize that Li's danger had been resolved. A warm embrace hugged the explosive Gu Mengmeng tightly and a gentle voice rang beside her ear, "Xiao Meng, it's all right now. Don't be scared, don't be scared." Pfft, Elvis spat out a mouthful of blood from behind Gu Mengmeng's ear. The blood stung Gu Mengmeng's eyes and instantly brought her back to her senses. Turning around, she saw Elvis's weak but relieved smile slowly falling down. Gu Mengmeng reached out to grab him but could not grab hold of Elvis's body. She could only watch as Elvis turned from his human form into a black wolf and fell down slowly, brushing against her fingertips. The entire battlefield was silent in an instant. There was not a single trace of the bloodbath and howls from a moment ago. Gu Mengmeng stood on the ground that was soaked in blood and lowered her head. However, she could not differentiate those who fainted from her beast pressure and those were already dead corpses. The moonlight was still hazy and it was like a veil that shrouded the wailing battlefield, adding a sense of coldness and mystery to the bloody scene. Gu Mengmeng stood in the moonlight and her legs felt as heavy as lead. She clearly knew that she had lost control at that moment. If Elvis had not hugged her, by the time she regained her senses, she would have been the only living thing here. Gu Mengmeng just stared blankly at everything, her gaze wooden and empty. Silence, the world was so silent that even the wind did not dare to enter this cruel scene. Suddenly, her vision blurred and Gu Mengmeng fainted on the ground without any warning, as if she was a puppet whose soul had been sucked out. Under the moonlight, a person walked towards her from afar. A pair of fox ears were rather conspicuous as he walked towards Gu Mengmeng step by step from the pile of corpses. He was calm and elegant, his gaze gentle and persistent, as if he was not stepping on a ground full of corpses but a path full of fresh flowers. Walking to Gu Mengmeng's side, he bent one knee to touch the ground, his slender fingers gently caressing Gu Mengmeng's cheeks. He smiled dotingly and indulgently, his cold voice carrying a tinge of malice, as if he was a stubborn husband indulging his beloved wife to fool around. He said, "Ah Gu, don't be anxious. I will let you slowly see that only I, Cole, am qualified to stand by your side in this world. I will stand at the top of the world with you and look down on everyone. It won't be long before you'll get tired of these pieces of trash that are holding you back, and then, kill them with your own hands. I will plan everything for you, and then stand at the most dazzling place, waiting for you to come to my side." As Cole said, he slowly bent down, wanting to kiss Gu Mengmeng's cheek. However, when he was only an arm's length away, he felt an intense pain on his face. Cole paused for a moment and stepped back. When he touched his face again, it had already started to rot. Cole clutched his wound and stared fiercely at the snake-shaped mark on the back of Gu Mengmeng's neck. His eyes were filled with venom as he said coldly, "Snake, you're still hindering me even after you're dead. One day, Gu will cut off your mark for me and let you completely become a dead snake." Dead snake. Aside from the topic, today's update has ended. That, babies, there are still 4 more days before February ends. Chapter 649. Swaying, the whole world was swaying. Everyone fell one by one in front of Gu Mengmeng, be it enemy or friend. The blood droplets seemed to be flowing in reverse, floating up from the ground drop by drop, hovering in the air to form a huge blood ball of the same size as the moon. Then, it exploded in an instant, and all the blood pierced towards Gu Mengmeng like sharp kunai. Gu Mengmeng stood rooted to the ground, unable to move, and could only watch as the blood blades shot towards her eyes. Pfft! A mouthful of fresh blood sprayed onto Gu Mengmeng's face, and the familiar smiling face became increasingly blurry in front of her. His slender fingers gently caressed her face, and a weak voice that was almost inaudible rang beside Gu Mengmeng's ears, "Mengmeng, it's good that you're all right. the originally fluffy and white tail was filled with mud, and Li's devil-like face slowly slid down in front of Gu Mengmeng. Gu Mengmeng's throat seemed to be tightly locked by something, and she could neither cry nor move. She could only watch as Leah fell into the pool of snow, with a pair of long and affectionate eyes still staring at her with a smile. Even though it was dim and lifeless, it still could not conceal the sense of relief and heartache. Leah. Gu Mengmeng suddenly sat up, her head full of sweat accompanied by a sense of dizziness. She tilted her body and fell into a warm embrace. The furry tail was gently stuffed into her arms, and Gu Mengmeng instinctively hugged it tightly. Turning her head, she looked at the smiling face right in front of her with misty eyes, and heard him saying gently, "Mengmeng, I'm here." Gu Mengmeng pounced into Li's arms, crying out loud. That dream was too realistic. It was as if she had really experienced Li's death once. "Mengmeng, don't be afraid, it's all right now." Leah hugged Gu Mengmeng lightly, patting her back gently, soothing her emotions. After crying for a while, Gu Mengmeng finally calmed down, and sobbed, "I dreamed that you died." Leah chuckled softly, using his fingers to lift Gu Mengmeng's chin. His long and narrow eyes were deep and affectionate, and his voice was as gentle as the spring breeze. His thin lips parted slightly. "You saved me, so I won't die. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid." "I saved you?" Gu Mengmeng was stunned for a moment before she recalled that fight. The last thing she remembered was a stray beast pouncing at the heavily injured Leah. Leah barely dodged it but exposed his abdomen to the other stray beast. She was so scared then that her brain lost control of itself and lost all rationality. And then, Gu Mengmeng widened her eyes and looked around, shouting, "Elvis! Where is Elvis?" Someone pressed on her head and a figure shrouded her from behind. He took Gu Mengmeng from Li's arms and placed her on his chest. He kissed Gu Mengmeng's little face and said in a hoarse voice with a tinge of laziness, "I'm fine, don't panic." Gu Mengmeng hugged Elvis back tightly and heaved a long sigh of relief. When her heartbeat returned to normal, Gu Mengmeng then said, "I remember, you vomited blood." Elvis played with Gu Mengmeng's long hair and replied softly, "Yeah. Did I hurt you?" Gu Mengmeng lowered her head, her heart filled with guilt. "You clearly told me not to release my beast pressure so easily, but I'm sorry." Chapter 650. Leah stood at the side and chuckled, looking at her with a gentle gaze. This stray beast attack may have been a disaster to Saint Nazir, but to Elvis and Leah, it was salvation. In this battle, Gu Mengmeng's emotions suppressed by Snake's memories seemed to have been released. She gradually revealed her original self, be it anger, worry or shyness. They knew that their Gu Mengmeng was slowly returning to her. This was a good thing, although the price was a little heavy. Elvis kissed Gu Mengmeng until her entire body went limp, before releasing her reluctantly. Gently wiping away the saliva at the side of her lips, he smiled as if he had not had enough. Gu Mengmeng straightened her body, lowered her head and asked softly, "Canwu?" Elvis's smile instantly turned cold. His gaze drifted to a place not far away, his voice carrying a strange calmness as he said, "I found him, he's fine." Gu Mengmeng heaved a sigh of relief, finally calming down completely. Raising her head, Gu Mengmeng looked around, realizing that she was no longer at the place where she was ambushed by the stray beasts that night. That's right, blood flowed like a river there. The first thing Elvis and the rest did when they woke up was naturally to leave as soon as possible, in case the stray beasts had any more tricks up their sleeves. Gu Mengmeng wanted to stand up to check on the children, but after supporting herself, she realized that her entire body was so weak that it was almost impossible for her to stand up. Leah carried Gu Mengmeng up and said, "Snake's power far exceeds the limits of what your body can handle. Forcefully unleashing his power has damaged your meridians. If not for the Beast King's regenerative abilities, you would have already been smashed into a pool of blood by the beast pressure you released." Gu Mengmeng did not struggle, she just secretly turned back to look at Elvis. Something was wrong. In the past, as long as Elvis was around, he would never let anyone carry her, but today, he had handed himself over to Leah. And when he stood up, he actually held onto a tree. Although it did not look like much effort, but, when had Elvis ever held on to anything to stand up? Something was wrong, something was definitely wrong. If, even with the Beast King's powers protecting her, she almost turned into a pool of blood, then how badly injured was Elvis, who forced himself to approach her while she was in a daze? Hubby. Gu Meng Meng bit her lower lip but could not say a word. Elvis looked up, his blue eyes were filled with indulgence and love as tranquil as the night sky. He stretched his hand out to caress Gu Meng Meng's little face, asking, "Do you want me to hug you?" As Elvis spoke, he reached out his hand to receive Gu Meng Meng. Gu Meng Meng clearly felt Li's hesitation. It had nothing to do with jealousy, he was worried about Elvis's health. Gu Meng Meng shook her head. She stretched out one hand with her palm facing up. "I want to hold hands." "All right." Elvis's large hand held Gu Meng Meng's little hand gently. He turned it around and placed the back of her hand by his lips, kissing it. Then, as if he was looking at the most precious treasure in the world, he held her little hand tightly in his palm. Leah and Elvis brought Gu Meng Meng to a big tree not far away. Hada was carrying Qi Xian in his arms, sitting under the tree in a daze. Jiaoyu saw Gu Meng Meng from afar and rushed over. As for Kanwu, he was tied up with tree vines and hung upside down on a tree. Chapter 651. You. Gu Meng Meng was confused and asked, "Why are you here?" "I was worried about you." "Us." "So I asked Barit to take care of my tribesmen for the time being. Once I see that you have safely returned to Saint Nazir, I will return to Sauter. During this period of time, Barit has given my tribesmen a lot of prey and I will repay him double before winter." Burke was still sitting under the tree, looking up at Gu Meng Meng with a faint smile but not moving closer. Gu Meng Meng nodded, indicating that she understood. Then, she looked at Elvis and then at Leah, asking, "Who hung Kanwu on the tree?" "Me," Elvis said with a hoarse voice. Gu Meng Meng frowned and turned back to meet Elvis's blue eyes. He was injured because of her, so she could not bring herself to criticize him. Gu Meng Meng pursed her lips and swallowed most of her words back into her stomach. She just said, "The child is still young, if he has done anything wrong, we can slowly teach him. Let him down first." Elvis took 2 steps forward and stopped in front of Kanwu. He turned around and leaned against the tree trunk. The sunlight shone through the layers of tree shadows and the mottled rays of light landed on his surroundings. He placed his slender hands on Kanwu's back and gave him a nonchalant push. "Rascal, do you think you can come down now?" Kanwu bit his lips and swayed for a long time before stabilizing his body. He raised his head stubbornly and looked at Gu Meng Meng. His azure blue eyes were like the sky that had been washed by water, so clean and clear that his sadness was clearly visible. Gu Meng Meng's heart twitched under Kanwu's gaze. She instinctively wanted to hug him in her arms and comfort him, but before she could raise her hand, she heard Kanwu say with a thick nasal voice, "Mummy, I'm sorry. It's all because I overestimated myself and charged into the battlefield recklessly, implicating you in danger. My tribesmen paid a painful price for my recklessness and you were unconscious for 2 days and 2 nights because of it. I did something wrong and should be punished. Please don't plead for me, let me bear the responsibility myself." Gu Meng Meng's heart ached terribly. Leah carried Gu Meng Meng to Kanwu's side as if he could read her mind. Gu Meng Meng hugged Kanwu in her arms and patted his back lightly, saying, "Silly child, it's not your fault. The stray beasts suddenly attacked us, you just wanted to protect Mother and the rest of the people. There's nothing wrong with that. You can't be blamed." Kanwu's tears, which he had been holding back for 2 days, broke down at Gu Meng Meng's gentle words. He wailed at the top of his voice until he could not make a sound. His face was red and he looked like he was about to suffocate. Gu Meng Meng's heart ached terribly and she hurriedly coaxed him, "Kanwu, don't cry, be good." Kacha the tree vines binding Kanwu broke apart. Gu Mengmeng was not mentally prepared and her body was weak, so she did not manage to hold on to Kanwu, causing him to fall onto the ground in a pathetic manner. This time, Kanwu was in a daze from the fall and he even forgot to cry. He stared at Elvis, who was standing in front of him with his azure blue eyes. He was so stunned that he did not know how to react. Elvis tilted his head and frowned. His eyes were cold and his entire body was emitting a sinister aura. It would not be surprising if he raised his leg and stomped Kanwu to death in the next second. He was born as a wolf, yet he cried so stupidly. And he's even my son. How annoying. Chapter 652. Gu Mengmeng bit her lower lip and frowned, but she did not say a word. Being educated by a father was a key factor for a child, especially a boy, to establish the foundation of his personality. She could no longer remember what a father's reprimand looked like. But her son should not be like her. Elvis slowly squatted down, his face still shrouded in a layer of darkness. He looked at Kanwu with an unfriendly gaze that even carried a murderous aura. You should think of ways to make up for your mistake if you know you made a mistake, and not apologize while shedding cowardly tears. Kanwu's tears were still welling up in his eyes, but he stubbornly bit his lip and forced his tears back. He just glared at Elvis, as if he wanted to use this method to prove that he was different from what Elvis had said. Elvis sneered and pinched Kanwu's little face. He said with some disdain, your eyes are not bad. But it is not wise to provoke a strong opponent that you cannot defeat. I will surpass you one day. One day. Kanwu roared. Elvis stretched out his sharp claws and swung it at Kanwu's back. Kanwu instinctively wanted to dodge, but he clenched his teeth and shut his eyes, using all his strength to control his body. He could not dodge, he could not run away. Otherwise, it would be equivalent to admitting defeat. There was no pain as he imagined. Kanwu secretly opened one eye and realized that the tree vines binding him had already broken into pieces, while he was completely unharmed. Elvis stood up and turned his back to Kanwu. He glanced sideways at him coldly and said, "The more afraid you are, the more you have to remain calm. Closing your eyes in front of a strong opponent is equivalent to giving up your own life." Kanwu staggered to stand up, his little fists hanging by his sides. His shoulders were raised and his chin was tucked into his collarbone. He looked up and glared at Elvis fiercely. Elvis turned around and did not look at Kanwu anymore. He said calmly, "You did not do anything wrong by rushing into the battlefield. Because my son is never a weakling that needs protection. Your fault is that you are not strong enough." Kanwu's little body seemed to be bearing a huge weight. His arms were trembling from his tightly clenched fists. He no longer roared, but was unbelievably calm. His voice was calm and not timid. He said, "Hey, will you teach me? Teach me to become stronger." Elvis let out a low laugh. He turned around and glanced sideways, his lips curving into a contemptuous smile. His voice was full of sarcasm as he said, "On what basis?" Kanwu lowered her head and did not look at Elvis anymore. After staying silent for a while, she spoke again, "Before I surpass you, can you protect my mother well? If you weren't my son, these words would be enough for me to kill you." Kanwu took a step forward and raised her head to look at Elvis. There was an expression on her face that did not match her age. She was simply a miniature version of Elvis, with the same cold smile, the same disdain and the same provocation. "Why do you have to say it as if you love me? You didn't kill me because you didn't want Mom to be sad." Elvis chuckled, admitting it. Kanwu took another step forward and stared straight at Elvis. "I will defeat you, I definitely will." Elvis's face was filled with disdain as he said, "Just a little brat who only knows how to cry when something happens? Alright, since you're my son, I'll wait and see." You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.